right, thank you guys so much for coming. This is going to be more of a workshop session with a demo of both Vue and also mobx and React. And Vue, it's kind of an amalgamation of ideas from a couple different frameworks. It's got something from Backbone, from Knockout, from React, and also from Polymer as well. And I feel like it's got the best parts of each of them, and it's very pragmatic about which trade-offs to make. And one of the things that's really special about this is that this is, I think, one of the few open source projects that's making a lot of money because people believe in it enough to actually contribute to its development. So this guy is working on this full time now, making $7,000 a month, American, just working on this framework. A lot of companies are using this. Most of the companies that are really big are the ones in China. Nintendo has some websites using it, but they're also GitLab is using this, and Laravel is using Shipping View as their default front-end solution. And Laravel, if you don't know, is kind of like the Rails in PHP. And it's doing all right. It's not doing anywhere near as well as React is. It's kind of like still the smallest fish in the pond. But you can see that it's growing pretty steadily. It's got 112,000 downloads last month. And one of the things, there are quite a few nice things about it, but I think the thing that I appreciate the most is it introduced me to computer properties and frameworks. One of the things that you can do with this is you have one piece of data that you actually do modify, and then you have a function that performs a transform on that data, and you get something else. But this thing, the round thing that you get, you never actually change, and you never have to worry about this being changed by something else. It's completely derived from the data that you get from the left. It's read only. And when this thing changes, the transform happens and the computer property is updated. And the cool thing about that is you can kind of compose these computer properties to get some really complex behavior. That kind of reminds me of Conway's Game of Life a little bit. And here is an example of something that I built at a previous place. This was a kind of web mini game. It's kind of similar to WarioWare for Blood, Sweat, and Tools, a discovery thing. And this is a bunch of little mini games that all can be completed. And once you complete them, you get points. And they have a countdown. When the timer runs down to 0, you lose. If you complete this, then you get you get points based on how much time you have left, how fast, how well you completed it. And the things that these all have in common is that they have a complete everything. Every game in this thing has a complete, and every game has levels. Each level has a complete. Each level has things that that are inside the level that can also be completed. When everything is completed, you can kind of chain those up together. So when everything is completed, then the game is complete, you win. Or when the timer runs out, you lose. This is an assembly game. When everything in the work site is complete, then you win. And the work site has a bunch of completables. When every completable is complete, then the work site is complete. And inside each one of those little things is a completable. If it's filled, then it is complete. So the implementation detail for how exactly something is completed can be different depending on what the thing is. But as long as the parent thing sees that this is complete, then it doesn't really care how exactly you implemented it. And this is another example of a game where you trace around this path with your finger or your mouse. And the reason it's 0.99 is not because it's like a math error or something. It's just sometimes it's really hard to get that last pixel somewhere that you missed. Um, and this game is completely different as well. You have a thing that's swinging back and forth. And when the proximity is really close to the center, the bullseye, and you hit it, then that counts as a good hit. And after you have however many good hits, then this game is complete. And so you can see that the implementations are very different, but whatever is using it, the containers for these games, they don't care about at all how the implementation is done. So it's really easy to split this into a team of completely different people that can implement it in however many different ways. As long as you have the API of what you want to count on to be sorted out ahead of time, then it's pretty easy to do. And here we'll do a very simple example using Vue and some code. So this is the bare bones starter for Vue that I just grabbed from website. And let's make this a little more fun. So instead of just having a message that's data bound, that's one of the things that's kind of cool about it too. It looks very React-like, but also does have data binding for when you do want to do something quick and dirty. Let's change this message into a count, and let's change this into a number starting at 0. And model message, instead of having an input with a model, let's add a handler here. So the way that you do events is they have beyond click is the long form for it. So this is something that kind of borrowed from Angular and Angular 2. There's a long form for things. There's also a short form for things. So when you're listening to events, that anything from a DOM event, you can add an at in front of, and this turns that into an event listener. So when you want to, when something is clicked, you want to say handle click. Let's call this an increment button, and turn this into a button. +1. And when this is clicked, all your methods live inside a property called methods, and handle click. One of the other things that's kind of convenient about this over React is that it does all the context binding for you automatically, so you don't really have to worry about doing the you don't have to worry about doing this. Oh. So you don't really have to do this. Handle click increment, and then we do this dot count plus plus, and let's show the number here. And let's turn this into like something that's kind of similar to the thing that I showed you guys earlier. Let's say that this is something that will, let's move this out actually. So this will be, let's call this a completable. And this can just be a variable object declaration, and inside the container you give it components. This is how you tell this thing. So there are two different ways to declare dependencies of things that you want to use. In Angular, there's like angular.component or angular.directive, and that makes things global. You can do that in here too. You can do view.component and then give it the name of the component, and then pass it the variable, the function declaration. But that way is not as frequently used as this one, because this one you can kind of name this however you want, and this is completable, and you pass in completable, and this is completely scoped within itself, so that you can have a few things with the same directive tag that don't have to know about each other, and it's only scoped within this thing that you declare this dependency on. And in the template for this, we'll just use the thing that we just declared. And this is a and we want to, in here, show the count, data count. Oh, one of the things I forgot is that anything that you're creating multiple instances of, you don't want to return an object for the data. You want to return a function that returns an object. That way, they don't share the same instance of the object. So this, you want to return a data that returns an object, and now you have a count. And you can have a few of these. Now you got two. And let's add some computed properties on here. So computed properties go inside computed, and you give it what you want to. So let's call this one, I think we might actually need to add another data in here. We have a count, and let's say that required count is 4. So when you have 4, when count gets to 4, then let's say this is complete. So we will say progress is going to be return this dot count divided by this dot card count, and is complete will be this dot progress, let's say equals 0, no, 1. And let's show, instead of just the count, let's also show the progress and the completion. Count, progress, There we go. And let's make this a little more visually interesting. So progress_bar.js, we just used this for a progress bar that we were working on for the submission site, and it's really simple to use. I already added the library into the. Actually, let me just grab this little piece of code from here. So, lifecycle hooks. Every component has, like, every component in here, they have a few lifecycle hooks. They have the init, which happens once when the thing is created, and they have ready, created when things are compiled, and they have ready when things are injected into the DOM. It's kind of similar to React's component will mount, but I feel like the API is slightly more elegant because it's kind of, it's shorter, it's really, you understand what's happening without having to type out a bunch of words. And here we probably want to create a progress bar when this thing is ready, when it's injected into the DOM, and we will say this dot progress bar equals new progress bar dot circle. This dot L gives you the reference to the DOM node of the container, and this will create a this should create type does not support this method. Oh, so one thing we should probably want to do first is, instead of having just a completable, we want to have the completable have a progress circle. Const progress, so we're creating another little component, and this is going to be really simple. We're going to have this thing accept in as a prop progress, and it's going to be a number. And if you are familiar with React, you can kind of see how this is similar to the prop types. And in the template, we only really need to give this a container to attach itself to. And when you create this dot progress bar equals new progress bar circle, this dot L, and when the progress changes, let's leave that until later. And similarly to how we added completable to the container, we will add the progress circle to the completable. And now inside the template, instead of showing a number for the progress, we could show that circle. And progress is not defined. Let me reference back a little bit, see what I missed. Let me make sure that this is showing up first. So if I put something here and we added that to the component, we do see this. So this is not adding itself to create, typo, created. Give me something. Container does not exist, null. This dot L, new progress bar. Sorry, bear with me for a brief moment of demo fail. Okay, progress bar. Sorry? Right. Thank you so much. When it's created, it's not in the DOM yet. All right, there we go. You can see a tiny little progress bar over there. Let's make this thing a little bit larger, and let's change this to vertical. Flex direction column. There we go. All right, so we have this progress circle, but we're not doing anything with it yet. We have progress that's being passed in as a prop. We want to change the value we want to set something to this instance of progress bar when that prop that's passed in changes. And the way you do that is you perform a watch, and you tell it what you want to watch on. So we want to watch progress. And this works the same regardless of whether or not the thing that you're watching is coming from a prop or a computer property or a data field. When you watch progress, you will get passed in the new value. And we don't care about the old value, but it's in here anyway. And when progress changes, we want to say this dot progress bar dot animate, and we want to animate it to the new progress, and let's say duration, because the default is a little slow, 300 milliseconds. And we need to pass that down. So we have progress here, and we want to pass that in here as a prop. And the way that you pass down properties that are bound is, so in Angular sometimes you have a question about inconsistencies between how some things are going to be evaluated as an expression inside the right hand, and some things are going to be evaluated as a string. So sometimes your properties are going to be, you have to pass them down like this. And sometimes that's not going to work because they're expecting it to already be an expression. In Vue, this is not ambiguous because the way that you pass that you bind to something, whenever you are starting something with a colon, this is short for vbind. If you start it with a colon, then that means you want to bind it as an expression. So we want to pass down the progress here, and when we click this, we can see something happening. Oh, we probably want to also protect, because this progress bar goes higher. So we want to, instead of setting this dot, well, we probably want to disable the click after after it has reached the maximum amount of counts that it should. So in here we can put a thing. This is kind of similar to Angular, where you're doing VF, and the expression would be if this dot progress, let's say equals 1. Sorry, not equals 1. So as soon as you, as soon as this is complete, you are no longer able to hit on +1. Another way would be if you wanted to set this dot count to math.min, the required count in the count. And the thing that is above it, this component, the container, it knows that whatever is inside is completable, and it can choose to say that we can do a repeat in here. Let's loop through, let's create 3 of these. Completable v4 equals completable in, let's make 3. Is that going to be 3 or is that going to give me 4? That gave me 3. Perfect. And let's add a reference. This is something that's kind of similar to React. You add a reference by doing a vref, and then you give it the name, completable. And inside this component, you'll now have access to this completable as a ref. Let's say in here, this is one of the things that I think is nicer in Vue than it is in React, where the components that you're using, it's kind of reactive in that you can use things inside and use the references in here inside the template as well. And if you do a completable dot map, let's say we only want to return whether or not it is complete. Did I put is complete in here? Yes, I did. Okay, so map is complete, and then I want to pipe this out to JSON. What's it going to give me? Completables. Refs.completables. vref completables complete aggregates progress. All right, let's add a few more computed properties in here. Add computed aggregate progress is going to be this.refs. The way that you reference refs created in here, this.refs, and we want to return is complete aggregate progress. So this, and for this one, we want to get the progress for each one of these. Want to return, actually we want to do reduce for each completable, we want to return the first one will be the accumulated progress, and then completable, and start this off at 0, and accumulated progress plus completable dot progress, and let's show that here. Please show me something. Aggregate progress is not defined. What am I doing differently here? I'm gonna bail on this one and switch over to this one because this is kind of close to what this was going to. So this one has computer properties for aggregate progress and are all complete, and these are using the references that are inside created in here, and this is getting all the progress in each one, reducing it and dividing it by the length. So the progress for all of these is, let's show this here. This has got to work. Aggregate progress. There we go. All right. And when these are all complete, because this has a VF, so this reference no longer exists, this could also instead be a vShow, and they would still exist in the DOM, so the references would still exist. And this is the progress circle, very similar to what we had. All right, so that's Vue. That's taken to a few more levels would be the thing that we made for that blood, sweat, and tools thing. And I think the thing that I really like about Vue is that it seems so simple. It has a good trade-off between the power of the templating language with like the VFs and the bindings, and also it's really like the component methodology is very similar to React's. It's got a bit of everything. The only trade-off is, I think, the ecosystem, which is not as powerful as React's. And I think if you want to build custom things, it might be better to do this, because if you don't want to use something that someone else already made that might not be custom fit for what you need, then if you're going to be building a custom anyway, do it this way. But if you do want to use something that someone else already built, you will be able to find more things in the React ecosystem. And I found that mobx is something that's kind of similar to this, that gives you computer properties, gives you simplicity, and also allows you to use things that already exist on NPM. So this is a typical React setup that almost is working, but if you're already familiar with React, you might see, so we have this completable thing that's very similar to what we had earlier. It has a count, required count, progress, and handle click increment. And when you click on this button, it calls this method count increments, but nothing happens. And if you're familiar with React, then you'll know that the reason is that you're not supposed to be modifying things directly on the component, because React doesn't know when something has changed. You have to do set state, and you don't really get computer properties from set state either. So the thing that mobx brings to the table is that you can this is kind of the kind of code that you would intuitively write to create something, but this doesn't intuitively work. You have to kind of change your paradigm to go into the set state asynchronous state setting. But with mobx, you get observables, you get computed, and you can tell things that are created in React components to observe the observables. That way, when you do stuff like this, your view updates automatically. So let's do that. So the first thing we have to do is, for every component that is going to be depending on something that's from an observable, we have to tell it to be an observer, decorate it with an observer, and everything that we want to observe, we have to decorate with observable. And progress is a computed value. The way that you do computed values in mobx is you decorate it with computed, and it has to be a getter. So we have two computed properties, one computed variable that's depending on these two, and handle click and permit modifies this dot count, and this dot progress used to be a function, no longer. It's now a computed property. Use it like any normal variable, and this is now working. And this is also pretty simple. This is the only thing you kind of have to get around is this observable, like the decorators that you have to add to things. You have to remember to add this, otherwise your thing's not going to update, and you won't remember. If you forget, then it might take a while for you to remember why this isn't updating. The other thing is the only thing that needs to be marked as an observer, it's not infective. It doesn't, so the progress bar is a component that's created just like a normal simple React component. It could even be a stateless component. It could be, you can also decorate stateless components with observer as well. But this progress bar doesn't know at all that this is being used by something that is using mobx. So it interoperates really well with things that weren't created using mobx. It just makes the things that you write I think it's a lot simpler to reason with if you can actually encapsulate all the logic inside. It's an alternative to something like Redux, which I feel like is useful, but maybe not for smaller or simpler applications, maybe not useful all the time. If you wanted to, though, you could actually do the same thing with Redux in mobx as well. All you have to do is you have to create like a singleton. You can create your own state tree. You create an observer, and this will be your state tree. And anything that you do to the state tree, let's call this const state tree, and anything you do like foo 0, this will, if you want to decorate your app and you want to pass this down, you can totally do that. You can kind of create your own Redux using mobx and choose to separate out the things that you feel like might be really complex if you wanted to. And that's it for mobx. The thing that I would really recommend reading for mobx is the creator created a series on Egghead. It's only 28 minutes long, and it's really, really simple. It's not like, I know the one that the Redux guy made is Dan Abramov. It's about 2 hours long. This is really simple. It'll take you half an hour, less than the time it takes for you to watch during lunch, and that's the presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Use the mics.
I have a question on computed properties.
Sure.
So you showed a tree of like inputs and then computed properties going to a computed property and then down to more computed properties.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, so if you were in a view or in a component that had that last computed property, how would you find out the tree? How would you find the tree that led to that value?
You don't. I guess the trade-off here is that you get simplicity from not having to worry about how you got it. If you do care about how you got it, you will have to trace down through each single level of component declarations to figure out how this thing managed to compute it. So that is one of the trade-offs with being able to only care about the last little bit.
So how would you go about debugging something like that? Like say your value is just wrong slightly. How would you just step through every level? Is that what you have to do?
If your value is wrong just slightly, so like you're expecting something to not be, that is, I guess, I think that would be how you would have to do it. You would have to log out at every computed property. You have to log out what value it is, what you're expecting it to be, and compare the differences. I wonder what would the alternative be for other competitors?
For like computed stuff?
For computed stuff, I think with Redux there is a reselect, but I haven't actually looked too much into that.
So I think the closest competitor would be like RxJS kind of observables. And I think they actually are the same thing. If you have like an observable and you just throw a bunch of stuff behind it, it will just turn into this one thing, and you'll have to go through and like figure it out. I don't think Redux is the same model in that I think it's more like you can watch each step as it happens. I don't know if it's better or worse, But I guess it wouldn't give you the simplicity of like, you wouldn't be able to black box it quite as well as you could with this, where I just want this value and I'll figure out the stuff later. I
Yeah,
think
there are
there's a weird
definitely
HTML
trade-offs
steps.
here. I'm curious to see, so the stuff that we've built with Vue before, it's not very heavily data-driven. So I'm not sure how well it would apply to the kind of things that we build here with like the different kind of portals that have huge amounts of data. And I don't know how often computer properties are useful in those kind of situations. Um, But I feel like for certain kind of situations, the computer properties do lend really well. If you have very complex behaviors, for example, I think for making games, it's really cool.
For the computer properties, how easy is it to do like unit testing? Like what gets emitted for you to test in, let's say, that kind of tree of computer properties?
If you want to do testing, you can treat computer properties exactly the same as you would any normal property on an object. You just read from it and you can see whether the value is what you're expecting or if it isn't. If you want to do unit testing, I actually kind of ashamed to say this. I haven't actually done any testing with Vue. I know you can do testing with Vue. We have not written any tests with Vue.
Hello, I have a question about computed property. I'm just curious if it's guaranteed that it's only recomputed if the data property is changed.
Yes. So the way that for both of these, the way the mobx and Vue, they do it pretty intelligently. When they're parsing the computer property, they figure out what value you're dependent on, and by doing that, they only update the computer property when the value that it depends on changes. One thing to watch out for is that you can use computer properties within computer properties, and that's really cool. It's really powerful, but also could result in a sort of nested update cycle where one thing causes the other thing to update, causes another thing to update, and causes the first thing to update again. That happened a few times when we were making that thing. Something to watch out for if you do use it.
When using Vue, say you're making some sort of a component and you're not sure if the rest of the website uses React or something, like, is it possible to use it in the same sort of website, or do you have to then choose to use React if the rest of the website or if something else on the website uses it?
Could you give an example of a scenario, I guess?
So the scenario would be for Sybil, I guess. She's making a component for wormbase.org that uses React right now. If she were to switch to Vue, then in the future we're kind of locked in for the whole website to use Vue, I guess, right?
It depends on how your website is built. If your website is a single page app and you already have an entry point for it, it's kind of awkward to have your React component instantiate a Vue component. You can bridge it in like the component lifecycle hooks. You can say like attach this is going to be in the DOM, and once the component has mounted, call the instantiation hooks for Vue. We actually did do that a little bit at the beginning before, where it was interfacing with a legacy framework from before the big framework days, and that's kind of awkward to work with. But if you have completely separate pages, though, if you have like an index.html and then you have like a separate other page.html, and those don't really interact with each other, then it's pretty easy to use Vue for just that one little component. That's also, I think, one of the reasons why both React and Vue are kind of popular with the backend people, I think, because it allows them to kind of have little pieces of interaction on their page sprinkled in that's kind of self-contained. And if you don't have to interact with other parts of your app, if they're not like all connected and have to worry about like changing routes seamlessly, then I think it's a great solution. That's also one of the reasons why it's being included as part of the front end solution for Laravel, is that it's really easy to add in little sprinkles of high interactivity. I'm not sure if that's the situation that you guys have with your Sybil project.
Yeah, it makes sense. That answered it, I think.
Cool. All right. Oh, yeah.
I have a question on templates.
Sure.
It looks like those templates are strings.
Right. Oh, I should really give Vue a much better. So Vue has such a powerful ecosystem behind it, all created by this one guy. Vue state of Vue. Vue has it has dev tools that are kind of similar to the. Let me see if I can get a list of stuff. And developers. Might not have been this article. Okay, so Vue has dev tools that are kind of similar to the Redux and the React dev tools. It's also kind of similar to Batarang if you guys use that for Angular. You can debug it, walk down the Vue's DOM component tree, and with the build system, it has solutions for both Webpack. Webpack is the preferred one. It also has parallel support for Browserify, where you can create components either in one .vue file that has the script, the styling and the JavaScript in one single file. You can split them out separately and import them into the .vue file so that your HTML is inside the .html, your JavaScript's inside the .js, and your CSS inside the .css or the .sass. You can kind of choose yourself. The reason that I was using string templates for this is just because I felt like CodePen would probably be the easiest thing to work on and share live. So after the presentation, I can give you guys the link and you can play with it yourselves without having to clone a repo and install stuff from NPM. For Vue's version 2, which was originally started around April, and it already has an RC out and should be releasing soonish. It has support for JSX templating as well, which I'm pretty excited for. It also allows for server-side rendering. It's going to have a lot of stuff. I feel like it's becoming a really lucrative competitor to React. The only thing that I'm missing from it is the ecosystem, and it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. If you don't have that many people using it, then you don't have as vibrant of ecosystem. But that solution is that problem is kind of sort of solved by the gigantic companies, albeit mostly in China, using this framework, and they'll be able to contribute a lot to the ecosystem as well.
Okay, when you say JSX support, do you just mean it can look like JSX, or would it also be like JSX as in it's pure JavaScript?
Pure
'Cause I noticed
JavaScript.
you had so you won't need that Vue-4. You can just use a JavaScript loop, or do you still
That
have to
is a
use-
very good question that I'm not really sure about. It might be an extension to JSX that adds directive support for it. I'll have to look into a little more. That's a very good question, though. I actually hadn't thought about that before. Thank you. All right. All right, thank you guys so much.